Hello viewers, this is the first video that we're going to upload from our channel SkullPrep, and we are going to focus on M1 from Edexcel Pearson IAL. As you can see that the first chapter is about mathematical models in mechanics. It's all about simple definitions. The book that are suggested by the Edexcel Pearson IAL does not actually contain any questions from this chapter. It defines and describes the words and terms that will appear in your exams. The questions from this chapter in your exam papers will only contain 1 to 2 marks, not more than 2 marks usually. And the thing that's more important for this chapter is your understanding, how better you can understand each terms and how better you can relate each term with specific questions, because all the questions will be different from every year. And yeah, memorizing is also important, but understanding is more important. So let's get started. The first actually I'm not gonna read all the whole passages, so if you want to read the passages, you can pause the video or read from your book. I'm just going to explain the terms in my words. So the first term over here is particle. The term particle actually means that the mass or the weight of the object will actually act from a certain point. That's basically, that point is usually going to be the center of the particle. So whenever the question says that take this thing as a particle, means that the weight or mass of the particle will actually act from its center and will not get sprayed over the rod or plank on which it is. And also the air resistance acting on it is also negligible, so we don't need to calculate the air resistance value for against the particle. So whenever the question mentions particle, you need always to get this point straight, that the mass or weight of the particle won't spray over the rod or plank, and its weight will act from its center or a specific point, and the air resistance acting against it is negligible. I hope this was clear enough. And the next term is rod. So the term rod means that it's straight, it won't bend or buckles. But yeah, you can't use the word bend or buckle in your exam because these are not the mark scheme words. The mark scheme words is rigid for bend and buckles. So it's better to use rigid than bend and buckles. So the term rod means that it's going to be always straight, it won't ever bend or buckle, it got no thickness, and the force that are acting on it will be distributed equally over the straight line. And yeah, this was all about it. And no, don't ever use bend or buckle. It's even in the book, but not in the mark scheme. It's not in the mark scheme words, so it's better to use rigid. The next term is lamina. Lamina means that it's going to be a straight, thin thing. You can think it of as a rectangular sheet of paper, and the mass or the weight of the paper will actually distribute equally over a plane surface. So it got thickness, but its thickness is very small compared to the others, and it got one dimension. And just think it as a rectangular sheet over a plane surface, and its mass will always going to be distributed equally on that plane surface. The next term is uniform body. As you can already understand from the term, uniform body means everything's on it is uniform. So whenever the question mentions that uniform, it basically means that its own mass or weight that usually acts from its center of gravity, the center of gravity will always be at its midpoint. If the question mentions a body is uniform, it means that the weight or mass of the body or the center of gravity is at the midpoint of the body, and all the forces acting on it are always balanced. So the opposite word for uniform body is non-uniform body. The non-uniform body is basically the opposite of everything. The center of gravity of a non-uniform body won't act from its midpoint, and all the forces acting on a non-uniform body will not be balanced. So these are the simple definitions or explanations for non-uniform and uniform body. The next term is light object. Whenever the question mentions light object, or whenever it says that the object is considered to be light, it usually indicates you to get the point that it's the mass of the object is 0, or you can directly consider the mass of the object to be 0, and or you can also think it of as the mass is really small, or the mass is negligible, so it won't even change your mathematical calculations. So whenever the question mentions light object, just straightforward, put that zero newtons. The mass of the object is zero. The next term is inextensible string. Again, the name suggests inextensible. It says that the string won't change its mass, it won't increase or it won't decrease over the whole calculation. It will stay the same. So if we take a string of 9 meter at the start of the calculation, it will stay 9 meter at the end of the calculations. It won't change. Inextensible string means it's going to be the same over the whole calculation. The next term is smooth surface. Smooth surface means that the surface won't cause any frictional effects. So whenever you're gonna do maths and the question mentions smooth surface, it means the surface won't have a friction acting against the object's motion. So you don't need to calculate the frictional force in questions like this. So you don't actually need to find the frictional value of the frictional force whenever the question mentions the term smooth surface. The next term is rough surface. Rough surface is simply the opposite for smooth surface. Rough surface is going to be rough, which indicates that it's going to give some frictional force against the object's motion. So whenever the question mentions rough surface, you always have to find the value of frictional force. The next term is wire. Wire means that it's going to be a thin length of metal and one dimension, and it can be both smooth or rough. It depends on the question. You have to, whenever the question mentions rough, do read it carefully. Whenever the question actually mentions wire, you need to read it carefully to get the point if it's smooth or not. And yeah, we usually use this to connect two particles like a car with a caravan, or maybe or maybe just thread beads onto it to act to demonstrate some suspended particles. The next term is smooth and light pulley. As you can already get the fact from our previous explanations, pulley, which is smooth and light, means that it won't have any frictional effect on the object's motion. That means there won't be any frictional force because of the pulley, and the mass of the pulley is negligible, so it is considered to be zero. So whenever the question mentions smooth and light pulley, you will simply ignore the frictional force and the weight provided by the pulley. The next term is bead. Bead is going to be you can just consider it as a small particle which can be threaded on a wire and can be suspended to use as a suspended mass or suspended particle. These are very simple definitions. Usually I have never, no, actually it came once in an exam, but it's not that much important, but still understanding is better because precaution is better than crying. The next thing is peg. This word peg means you can simply think it of as a clip. It supports or it fixes a thread onto a specific point so that a suspended mass can be hung on it and you can do your maths or calculations. It's just a clip to fix some things over a specific point. The next term is air resistance. We all know what air resistance is. Air resistance is considered as the resistive force experienced by the presence of air in the opposite direction of the motion. But in Mechanics 1, we always ignore the value of air resistance by considering it to be negligible. And why do we do this? Because the amount of because the air resistance's value is too small and it won't even change your mathematical calculations. So we just simply ignore it. The next term, wind, means that our calculation is being done in an area or in a place where air is present, but the air is not that much forceful or strong to create any resistance against the object's motion. And it also indicates that the calculation is not being done in vacuums and all. So whenever it mentions wind, we can just simply ignore it because it won't cause air resistance. The last term is gravity. Gravity means that the force of attraction that attracts the mass or attracts all the objects which has mass towards the Earth's surface. So gravity, simple definitions, it's always used in physics. So it's going to be same in here also, but the value for gravity is gonna change now. The value of gravity is 9.8 meter per second square. I repeat, the value of gravity is 9.8 meter per second square, and it's always going to be the same. The value for gravity is constant for all the calculations in M1. Yeah, it can change if the question it changes it, or if the question mentions any changes in it, but if the question doesn't mention anything against gravity, then it's always going to be 9.8 meter per second square. I hope the video was helpful for you all and you understand the terms that I tried to explain to you all. If you got any problems, do comment the problems in your comment section. And yep, I hope this was helpful, and stay connected to our channel for more videos, and I will provide some notes and on how to write the mark and like with the mark scheme words, how to write the definitions in the description box. So yeah, do stay connected to our channel and we will upload more videos on it. Thank you for watching us.